Megan is in the room. Hi, Megan. Big hand from Megan. Hey, Sarah.
Yes.
Big hand for Sarah.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us here today. And I must say we're so starstruck with, we're just coming out of the screening, and I was just saying to the audience, and I think the people in the room feel very emotional now. It's such a powerful experience to watch this movie, even though I've seen it many times before. We're going now to jump into a Q&A session, and there's lots of people in the room with me in here, mostly students and researchers from KTH. And we're going to field some questions from them, so think about questions you might have. I've also prepared a few questions to get us started, but before we jump into Q&A, I want to say a few words about Megan and Sarah, so you know who you're dealing with here. So I'm going to read. Megan Smith is an award-winning entrepreneur, engineer, and tech evangelist. She served as Chief Technology Officer in the Obama administration after spending over a decade as Vice President at Google, leading new business development. She's currently the CEO and co-founder of Shift7, an organization working collaboratively to solve systemic, social, environmental, and economic problems. Director, producer, and writer Sarah Kerruish, a Peabody Award winner, that's a big deal, okay, and Emmy nominee, that's also a big deal, was part of the original documentary crew at General Magic. She currently serves as Chief Strategy Officer at Kiron Medical, dedicated to the detection and treatment of breast cancer using AI. Let's give them another big warm round of applause. So, Megan, I want to start by asking you, you were so young must have been really a formative experience for you, the years at General Magic. And you've gone on after that to become wildly successful. I mean, you were the CTO of America, for Christ's sake, and you've been high up at Google for over a decade. So, and this is true for many of the other early employees of General Magic too. They've been very successful, but the starting point, the General Magic saga, was sort of a failure too. So how has this changed or sort of influenced the way you see a failure and success through your career?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks for having us. And thanks, it was such an honor and chance to get to work with this team and be part of this in the early days. And, is the days when people say, why would I want to carry something around with me all the time? So it's sort of super early. And now we have our phones and our watches. I think that in a lot of ways, the best situation is when you're learning in almost a guild, like I happen to be in London right now. I'm in a different part of London, actually in the Dome, and there's like people up on stage here. So I'm sorry to be in an unusual place. Sarah's in a different part of London from me. But, here in Europe, the idea of guilds, that's been an idea in the world of apprentice journey
Sure.
The source would be, right? That we could work in such a team that was so passionate and so interested in trying to make this change in the world together and had so many different aspects of capabilities. That's an amazing place for a young person to be. And, I think Tony in the film talks a little bit about being youngest in the group. And I was one of the younger ones, of course, as you mentioned, and we worked with Wendell Sanders and in we were in the hardware group, overlapping and with software and others. And so, Wendell was at Fairchild, which is the precursor to Intel. Yeah. I mean, to stand, it's like the baton of a relay that's passed through time of people who you get to learn from, whether it's your professors, whether it's, your peer teammates. One of my professors once at school was saying, part of being at school is look around the room. It's like all these people who you're going through on a journey with. And so I think that's a very incredible experience to get to be part of teams like this, especially this level of an elite team that had achieved so much with the Macintosh, and then was trying to go for it again. And of course, in the movie we were too early, but then Amy, as she says, it goes supernova after. So I hope for everybody that you get the chance to work in teams like that. And the Roald Dahl quote that says, look around the world, and I won't get it exactly right, but it's like the most magical things are in the most unexpected places. And so you don't really know where that's going to be. But earlier today, I was on stage with a woman named Ruma Bose, who's a friend, and her uncle is Professor Bose, my professor for acoustics, like Bose speakers. And I'm sharing that because he gave us advice, and one of his advice pieces, and I know there's a lot of students, was find your passion. Find your passion, because you guys are performers, you're going to do things. So if you find your passion, you'll be, unstoppable. So I think that's a thread that's very present with this team. And so I think not only did we learn, one of my goals going to General Magic was learn how to ship a product. I'm a mechanical engineer. I wanted to learn how to do that. So there were pragmatic and practical things, schedules and teamwork and all of that. But there was also a permission to be very passionate. And we need more of that in the world. And what I love about the next generation coming up, you're very passionate, you face a lot of complexities. It's going to take extraordinary teamwork. And so to fuel that with yourself and feel welcome, that was another big part of what we got. We were welcome to be in that team, and everybody wanted to try to do this thing together.
It's so fascinating to watch you, and you're just having this big smile on your face, and you haven't mentioned the word failure even once. To you, it really seems like a good experience, even though we know back at the time there was a lot of anxiety too, of course.
I think it was harder for those elder than us. It was hard for us, but we believed, they knew that things like this can happen because they had done it before in different ways. Although I thought Joanna's note early on about the early days of the Macintosh, when it was too expensive and, they didn't sell as many in the beginning, but they stayed the course. Apple was able to stay the course. And of course, I'm talking to you on an Apple Mac computer, which is beautiful and stunningly designed. So I think we had a hard time, but I think that you see it with Mark and Joanna and Andy and Bill and Susan, and that group who knew that they could get there somehow and had that expertise. A little bit harder for them, but it's still hard for us. But it's something in Silicon Valley and in general in the world, wherever these centers are that emerge over time, where the energy is, it's like a sine wave, it goes up and down, and it was hard. And yet maybe we came to the next thing and just got on the next wave. Yeah. And we started to learn again, and we knew that it might not work then. Then we had that experience. Tony talks about a decade of failure, trying to figure out how to get this kind of a device to be. Sarah, I don't know, you would have thoughts.
Yeah. Please step in, Sarah.
First of all, I want to say, Hannes, that your review of General Magic was the best I've ever read.
Wow.
In terms of really understanding, and I'm not just saying that, in terms of what the story is really about. Because for me, it's not a story of technology, actually. It's a story of soul. It's a story of purpose. And it's a story of why not. And what really, really fascinates me is the why not people, the people who look around them and see that things could be different and better. And they want to harness the resources available to them to do that. And what I witnessed at General Magic was one of the most extraordinary teams ever, probably in the history of technology. And I had the privilege of watching them work as an outsider, because I was a filmmaker in that context. And I learned so much about those specific lessons for everyone who says, why not? Why can't this be better? What does it take to actually realize that vision, that dream, that product? And I think there are really important things that we can learn, that we can take to the next thing that we do. And that's really what I was hoping to capture by telling the story of General Magic, Megan, and all these other amazing people.
Thank you. And what Sarah is referring here to was a blog post that I wrote in a very emotional state after first seeing this film, and it begins saying this was almost like a spiritual experience for me, and then it goes on, and it's about sort of how I see that there are two types of failure. So thank you for that, Sarah. And I want to ask you, I was actually long time ago, 30 years ago, I was filmmaker myself, a documentary filmmaker. And I know that's why I'm especially so impressed by this film, because I know how hard it is to be there in this messy reality and turn it into an appealing story. And I think you and your co-directors has really, really turned this into a work of art. And so my question there, and you sort of answered already, but I want to ask you again and sort of dig deeper, is why, what was the motivation? Why did you want to make this movie?
I think it comes again from understanding, is there a blueprint for understanding how to bring big ideas to life, and what is the role of failure in that? And I also have had very personal experiences of failure, eviscerating experiences, which are not pretty. And how do you recover from those kinds of experiences? But ultimately, I think as it relates to the film and the lessons, I think it all comes down to the hero's journey, which is such a good model it's obviously the foundation of storytelling, but I also think it's the foundation of the journeys that we go on when we try and do these things, when we try and make things or dream things into reality. And those stages are, the hero gets a call to adventure. You have an idea, you get a call to do something, and then you go on that journey. You decide to embark on that journey. You cross into another world. In my case, I crossed into a world from, the Isle of Man in the UK to Silicon Valley, which was entirely a different world. And then you have lessons to learn. And typically there are 3 lessons. The last one is horrendously painful. And if you're successful in that, then you come back with new knowledge that you bring into the world that you left behind. And I think that applies to, whether it's a film story or, a dramatic arc or the life of an entrepreneur or a why not person. It just seems to follow a very similar pattern. And so my hope is, again, if we can share those lessons and help people develop that understanding and that strength to keep going, that fortitude. I mean, Tony's amazing at that, like his just ability to look at what's not working and keep going. And Megan is amazing in terms of if you're putting together a team and going on this adventure, you want Megan on that team and you want her voice on your shoulder saying, make sure that everyone is at the table. So it's just capturing the wisdom of these amazing people and bringing it to people. So they have something to keep them going, like a little magic pouch that when they're feeling lonely, desperate, like they want to give up or they can't think through the next idea. It's like, here's hopefully a little bag of tricks that you can keep with you and that will help you on your own hero's journey to make the world a better place.
That's beautiful. And I want to write on that. Megan, I want to write on what Sarah just said, because you're at CogX in London now, and I heard you a few years ago when you were there after a screening, and there was a Q&A, and you were saying something back then about how in the team in General Magic, how kind people were with each other. And how this kindness is something you really appreciate, and something maybe you're to some extent also is lacking in today's sort of entrepreneurship, which could be pretty tough, I guess. Do you want to expand on how you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And under stress, people get a little, there's not every moment of that, but there's an attention to kindness in the best teams and respect. And I got to do the commencement for MIT. It was really fun. And I was able to talk to them about, knowledge is important, but kindness maybe is equal or maybe a little bit above, just that all these things are important, but how we treat each other matters a lot. And it's interesting because like here at CogX, there's tremendous amount of conversation about AI and which is really right now aggregated intelligence, not so artificial. It's just pulling together everything we want to do together. Maybe a big heist of intellectual property.
Yes.
Perhaps, as the writers are saying.
Yeah.
But the way we design that, should it be artificial wisdom? Like, do we, are we wanting this thing? And the parts of it, I think, is when we're really bashing each other, or like lording things over each other, and that can be a real engineer's tech environment sometimes, and it's not necessary. And we have to like keep ourselves from doing that if we get into that mode. And it really makes a lot of people step away. When you see that kind of environment, they will walk away to a different environment. Obviously, we see the same kinds of things in political arenas, other kinds of fields. The more each field can see the value of collective genius, the whole team there. One of my favorite things Eric Schmidt would do in meetings, who was the CEO of Google for a long time when I was there, before Larry took over, Larry Page, Larry and Sergey are founders. You'd be in a meeting, there'd be people, and we would be nearly done, and he would just always like pause for a second. He would do a couple different things. One of them is he would always double check with the engineers to make sure they really could do like anything here, you know, because a lot of times the product managers are, when we're going to do this and this and this, and so making sure the voices are there. But then he would always, and the main point here is, ask people who hadn't been saying much or hadn't said anything, what they thought. And there would be a pause. And then they would say the most incredible thing, right? It would just, bothering to ask the question, you know, is so important. Ask others, include other voices, and see it. And I have, this is my colleague, Joy Bualam-Winnie. This is a book that'll come out on Halloween. And she's an amazing MIT researcher who found like all our cameras are quite racist, and AI face recognition technologies. So she had to use a white mask, or found that a white mask could be recognized and not her face. This is that story. What is interesting about Joy, she's one of the people like Sarah's talking about, like these doers. And so this story is of her then working on how we're going to audit these algorithms. How are we going to change for example, the US has a NIST is our standards group, a database full of faces to test face recognition. It was 89% pale male. Okay, let's like adapt that, and let's put humanity in here, and let's raise the bar so that it works for everyone before we ship it. And so really active, you know, person in our engineering world driving that and make sure the technology can have kind inclusion as well. So
I have to get that book. And so with that, we're sort of entering also the train of diversity. This is something I noticed when watching Gender Magic. It was a time, or at least a setting, a context with a lot more gender diversity, at least, than we're used to seeing lots of teams now. What happened? Are we slipping backwards? This is a question to both of you. And what could we do about that?
I think Matt is an expert on that. Oh, nice.
Right.
All right, so this is an image I just wanted to show, that sometimes I put this up here because we have the unusual experience as young people to have worked with the Mac team. And so when I say this Apple or Mac, you think Steve and Steve. This is often the hero picture, right? And he deserves that. But at the same time, we could just show these pictures.
Yeah.
You know, Steve is here with them, you know, so it doesn't have to be that there's the sole hero, because really a group of people do things. Usually there's a visionary, a couple of visionaries, one or two who've like thought of the idea. Yeah. And then Reid Hoffman, who was just here at Cogx, says you always need the smart generalists who come early, and they just are doing whatever is needed. You know, Joanna Hoffman's certainly one of those physics grad from MIT who became really Steve's sparring partner and product marketing manager for the Mac. Kate Winslet plays her in the movie about Jobs, but also, you know, Susan Kerr down here, who did look at your phone and look at the graphics. That's Susan. You know, Susan was the front end of the graphics. Bill Atkinson here, quick draw the back end, Andy Hertzfeld. So this team it's not racially balanced, but it is gender balanced, you know, for not balanced, but 7 men, 4 women, and a baby. One thing that's not well known about Steve. Yeah, the rabbit. And this is, you know, just I happen to have this. I put some prototypes of early smartphones that Zarko and others made. We all made this. I was the mechanical engineer doing this stuff. But I think it's worth seeing the imagery, because we are starved for more balanced imagery of who does what. I held this image up on stage today. So there's, you know, Minnie Mouse, but, you know, she's actually Ada Lovelace for the day, which is the first person in the history of humanity to write an algorithm at the same time of Darwin here in London. The British we've got Darwin looking at our origins, and Ada's, I wish to bequeath to the generations a calculus of the nervous system. I think we can figure out the math of the cerebrum if we think about it like we did with astronomy, like genius, right? And so we need to know that Ada, or Ida B. Wells is doing data science with Smart Community, or we need to know that, Jane Addams was doing data science, won the Nobel Peace Prize for inventing social work. And there was smart, wise city data back then, not digital. That this next, at the end of this month, 6 supercomputers at the Army base in Aberdeen in Maryland will be named for the first 6 programmers in America. 6 women, Jeannie Bartok and others. Yeah, so we need to know that like everybody's been doing this stuff. And so I think there's 2 parts of the imagery I'm showing you. One is that there's women and men, people of all races, people of all backgrounds, people of all ages who do this work together, who think of this work. Maybe the visibility, the treasure, and the network goes to certain people who have more privilege, but everybody's always been there and doing that through history and today. And then the other part is just team, just not doing that that one hero, but this team. Yeah. That is how technology really happens.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My next question would have been about the optimism that we saw in the film and where it's gone, or what you're optimistic about now these days in terms of how technology can change the world. But I'm going to shut up and not ask that question, but you can think about it and instead turn to the audience, because I think we have some questions here from the audience. And do you want to come up here and use this mic? So here's a question here. And you'll get to introduce yourself, and maybe if you stand next to me.
Or the camera there, right? Okay, yes. This one's from you, Megan. My name is Sebastian. So you had a long career, worked in like a high-pace environment and startups and so on. How do you manage your energy over your career to avoid like burnout, or how you handle setbacks and like downturns?
Thank you, Sebastian.
Yeah, and Sarah also will have some reflections here, but I think it's really important to pay attention. And I think the world is getting a little better at paying attention to these things after COVID, that more people have consciousness to have more mindfulness for themselves, for their family, for each other. It's really important, in that picture, that baby that was there was one person in the Mac team who had a baby. Everybody else didn't have children yet. They're mostly not married and didn't have children. And so Steve Jobs required that dad went home at 5:30 every day. It was a rule. He said, you have to be with your family. It was a rule. That is not known of Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. That's not the rumor or the standard. And yet, he's this visionary leader who understood that about family. And some of the young ones, also Joanna told me, like, we were always so like, why does he get to, and, they were doing their things. And so it's worth noticing that leadership, right? And so trying to do that, it's hard to balance. I think of it more as a free for all. You're like juggling all this stuff all the time. I have 2 awesome boys. They're good friends with Sarah's kids too. I don't know, you just have to try to integrate it. One of the things Marissa Meyer once said, who was running search at Google, that she always tried to check in with her team to understand how to manage what she called resentment. Mm-hmm. And what she thought was like, she wanted to know, like she's had a young person on her team who had recently graduated from college, and every whatever day, Wednesday of the week, they had dinner with the roommates, the old friends. And if he missed that, he was really sad for the week. And then she had another person who was a mom who liked to go to the soccer games of her daughter and her son. And so if she could leave and go do that, she was happy to talk to people from California to India in the middle of the night, anytime, whatever. And so paying attention to what it is each individual person is trying to specifically balance and managing to that. So Marissa, if it was 3:00 and time for the soccer game and people would say, hey, Katie, can you stay later? Marissa would be like, she can't, but you can get her, at 5, so having attention to what you care about and what you don't want to miss, and managing that with your teammates and being more transparent, I think will help with this. And I think it's a really important value in teams for people to share with each other and the leader to also help manage too.
Thank you for that great question and great answer. It boils down to kindness again, I guess. I think we have another question over here.
Transparent. Yeah.
Why don't you join me here and will everyone see you?
Yes. Yeah, so you touched a little bit about AI.
What's your name and who are you?
Oh, sorry.
First.
My name is Hannah. I'm a first-year master student in mechanical engineering here at KTH. Yeah. So for my friends and I, AI has really hugely impacted us in our work life and with our startup ideas. And so my question is, how do you think that we as students and aspiring entrepreneurs can use AI to our benefit and maybe even to lessen the risk of failure?
Thank you.
Yes, Sarah's going to have more here, yeah, because she's working in AI and healthcare where there's a lot of benefit. But I think, Mustafa was here and he's written this book, and I don't know if it's a tsunami and we're in trouble or if it's we're going to surf it or some combination. I think we have a lot of work to do together and listening to each other to make sure we get through this well and bring everyone along. I'll hand off to Sarah some of your thoughts here because you've been working in this area more than.
Yeah, I would say that the way I would think about it is, are you going to use AI to solve a really meaningful problem that you're really passionate about? There's lots of things we can do. And in my case, we're building AI algorithms to detect cancer. So that feels very good every day to show up and know that we're doing something that could have big impact. And we know it's already helping doctors save lives, 13% increased cancer detection rate in the sites where we've rolled it out. So that feels really, really good. But I think the fundamentals, if you are going to use AI in anything that you're building, I think you just always have to think about the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are you building algorithms that are inclusive? Are you making sure that they're representative of the population you're aiming to serve is really the fundamental question, I think. And it can't be an afterthought. It has to be something that you build in from day one. And so for us, that means, for example, getting patient data from women all around the world. So especially African-American women, Asian women, Caucasian women, just to make sure that MIA really does work for every woman everywhere. So I think that's how I would think about it. Are you solving something meaningful and important? Because we sure have a lot of important problems to solve. And when you are building algorithms, build it with equity and inclusiveness from day one, and make sure, as Megan always says, that you have everyone at the table.
Thank you. And that's sort of answering my previous question about what should we be optimistic about now. I think that's beautiful.
I think we should be optimistic about our power to make incredible change in the world, like to harness that passion, that drive, that desire to see, whether it's climate change or inequality or democracy. It's just, we have the tools, we have the will, we have the creativity. We know that. We just have to harness it and apply it and focus it on the right things.
And prioritize it, because right now AI is doing very harmful things. People for face recognition getting sent to jail, misrecognized and things. Just quickly sharing like really fast graphics. This is who speaks in movies from a couple years ago. I don't know if you can see this, but the blue is men's lines and the red is women's lines. In 2,000 popular films. So if we just crawled this data from our AI, so as Sarah said, being mindful about the imbalance of the data you're working with is really critical so you don't create harm. And there's sort of an interesting, let's see if this will advance. I don't think it wants to advance there. This is an interesting other thing. I got to work on, doing the acquisitions of mapping, like Google Earth and maps. And one of my colleagues created something called MapMaker. And this is Lahore, Pakistan, with the metadata that was available a while ago. And the people themselves, across 6 months, drew this onto the map. So they just put themselves on the map. So this is the activity on that tool. So someone could have said, oh, well, we got to wait for the governments to get the metadata or somebody could have said, hey, how could we use the fact that we're connected at nearly the speed of light to see who would help co-create something with us? And so in the age of AI, you can also think about human intelligence and the network itself and how you might, include more people in ways that assume capability and assume talent and assume really good things. And just last thing, this was a really cool thing that came out of, it was called DQ Institute, all the capabilities that everyone could have from school and onwards, and how we might then build a world that has so much more capability by thinking that way. So I think exactly building what Sarah was saying, making it meaningful, noticing the huge speed bumps and like canyons to not fall in, which we're already in, and trying to use this stuff for just as much as self-driving cars, for justice or for equality, or, you know, for social services in your country, civic tech and philanthropic tech and commercial tech, whatever it is. They're like, one of my ideas is, why doesn't Uber and Lyft make a capability that they could get a tax break if the driver goes and delivers food for people, from somebody who has extra food to other people who need it in the city? Or like, why don't we write apps like that, since we have the capability to piggyback onto the capability?
Fantastic. And that's how we get from AI to artificial wisdom.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
wisdom
for the question and for the answers. I'm getting signs here that so several questions, but Maya is telling me to. Actually, why don't we ask Megan and Sarah? Do you have time for another question? Because
I do.
Then we have one question here over here.
Thank you, Hannes. Maybe I'm a representative for also inviting people from the other side of Sweden. I'm from Chalmers, Gothenburg, the other place in Sweden, as we say.
The backside.
So the West Coast. And I just want to go back to this failure thing. I mean, you worked so hard for so many incredibly many hours, and sleeping at work and everything. To me, it sounds like a recipe for becoming bitter when you eventually this fails. And a lot of these, I mean, the reason why it failed was beyond your own. You couldn't do much about it with these business cases and all that things that be decided in the boardrooms. What is a recipe not to become bitter? I think that's a fight that we all have to fight, maybe, or. Maybe it's more of a Swedish thing.
Great question. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think it's a really good question. And I think, what I tell my team now, an amazing team, incredible team, I think, producing some of the best AI counter detection technology in the world, is that we may not be the ones at the end of the day. We may even produce the best results. We may be the best technology, but we may not succeed in the market ultimately. But your work matters. Every day matters. Every contribution you make matters. Your thought leadership matters. Your trial designs matter. The way that you develop algorithms inclusively matters. So that's how I think about it now, is that the work matters. It may be that you're a tributary to a bigger stream, but what you're doing, if you're doing something important that could potentially transform the lives of many or even millions, that's hugely rewarding. And that's the reward. It's not about that binary success or failure. It's being part of this extraordinary journey in this momentous time.
Yes.
That's beautiful. You see why this is a spiritual experience. You see where it's coming from. Do you want to round up with one more question from a student? Manuel, do you want to come up here, and then we'll let you off the hook? So
I just have to let the audience know one thing while the gentleman comes up to the stage, is that my next film is actually about Sweden. So I have a great and deep interest in Sweden.
Yes.
A completely different subject.
And it's coming to the Stockholm Film Festival, isn't it?
I hope so. It's just, we're submitting it tomorrow. But I wanted you guys to know that I have a deep fascination with your country, and going way beyond technology and general magic. Sorry.
And I got to come all the time to Sweden during General Magic time, and to Finland. We were working with Ericsson and Nokia and Lidgard. And Lidgard is a colleague who I think sometimes you guys are connected with.
Good friend of ours. Is Anne in the room, Anne Lidgard? No?
I don't know if she showed up, but anyway, so we would come through Denmark into Copenhagen, into Malmö, and go to Lund, and then we would go to Kista, and I was there probably every 2 months for about a year or two, so I love Sweden.
Fantastic. Okay, so final question.
Okay, well, hello.
For you.
Well, first of all, thank you for being today here with us. And I'm Manuel. I am a startup founder, KTH Innovation alumni. And by education,
he's got a T-shirt that says anti-tech.
Yeah, I didn't think about it when I left home, but now. Well, and I'm an AI engineer, and I also study part-time bachelor in philosophy. And my question was about failure, because I feel like most of the times when we hear failure stories, like we hear them when we know that there's a happy ending. But I was thinking about the moments when you fail, when you feel like an imposter, like you are a failure, like you are stupid, an idiot, like you've been losing your time. And the question is, how do you navigate emotionally that moment?
I was personally eviscerated. Like everything I thought about myself turned out not to be true. And it was ridiculously hard and painful. And in that nothingness of like, you know, of this devastation, I started to think it was so freeing. If you can go through it, it is so freeing. If you can ask yourself the question of now what? What's important to me now? And actually, it was one of those moments that led to me. I was in the park. My world had fallen around me in all kinds of dimensions. And I was thinking like, okay, well, what now? And I was thinking, well, what have you always been interested in, Sarah? And I'd always really been interested in medicine and health and had often thought about going to medical school, but never gone. And I knew a little bit about technology and I knew a little bit about how to pull teams together to make things. And I thought, well, and health tech was coming. And I thought, well, maybe I could do something in health tech. And honestly, my life since then has been so much more interesting than I could ever have dreamed. And it was only because of that failure and only by looking at, you know, okay, so what's important now? And obviously needing to keep going. I had 3 young children at the time. Then that just led me on these amazing adventures. And this has happened to me a number of times now, not so dramatically, but you know, when you get those moments, they are the most powerful moments to learn about yourself and what's important and what you're capable of. And it's never that construct, that thing that you'd attach to, that you so wanted to be successful. The meaning actually, for me, has never been about that. It's been about the deep learning about what's possible and what we can do together.
That's the true meaning of deep learning. It's not an engineering term, it's a spiritual term.
Yeah, it's a spiritual term. I also think it's important to notice that, you know, that same imposter syndrome, that stuff that comes, or like, you know, oh, you couldn't do this. Also, the community around you can help a lot. And I think the ability to see clearly, Sarah, as you were describing, and then the community around, and it's really important to notice bias in some of that and make sure that we're teaming to support anybody who looks any way, to see that they have great capability and great talent. And even if this didn't work this time, again, to Sarah, like tap into your passion, tap into what you think is needed in the world, whether that's going to manifest in a technical way or in a policy way or in a film way or in a music way or in some combination of all of those. The person I was holding up here, Joy, she's a poet of code. So she's blending all kinds of different things together, which is cool. So, and sometimes the world gives you a message you do not always, you have to fit in a box, you know, which is a failure mode also to keep people boxed in. So thanks for that question. And I think surviving that and then trying to figure out how to thrive in that is part of, you know, living. And yeah, as you said, Hans, deep learning.
Yes. What a beautiful way a nice note to end on in a conversation about deconstructing failure. I think that was a very nice note to end on. So thank you, Manuel, and thanks all of you, and special big thanks to you, Megan and Sarah. So we're going to let you go now, and you're actually going to go into the next Zoom room with Maya and wrap up while we move on to the final part of our program. But before we do so, let's give a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck with all your amazing things.
Thank you.
Yeah, go team.
Bye.
Go the team.
Bye. Yes.